This generation is all about transition. The industry is pulling itself in a billion different directions, and the console wars of before are becoming about as relevant to the modern era as the siege of Carthage is to NATO. There are new business models, both good and bad, mad new concepts that blur the line between home and portable, new ideas about the very nature of consoles as things versus the prospect of them as services. Indie developers are making AAA games, AAA developers are making indie games, the rules are being rewritten, hopefully to make way for meaningful change. The most exciting things happening right now aren't coming from the industry's Goliaths, they're coming from its Davids. The 8th gen is a time of underdogs rising, and witnessing Polish developer CD Projekt Red's ascent to power as the Lord Protector of the RPG world is like standing in the crowd at Charles I's execution, but a sort of 21st century version of it where Oliver Cromwell's mad about Dragon Age 2 being cobblers instead of, the crown dissolving parliament or whatever. I mean, it is relevant, Burns, because the fascinating thing is that he deposed a monarch to become a monarch. I mean, he had absolute power, he had a state funeral, the title got passed to his son when he died.
No one cares about Oliver Cromwell!
The road to Witcher 3 was a perilous one for CD Projekt. It's a wonder that the game even exists, an outright miracle that it's massively popular with audiences all over the world. Way back in the mid-2000s, CD Projekt worked hard to adapt a series of Polish fantasy novels into the form of a PC-exclusive RPG. The books provided a deep well of lore to mine for a game of this type, but were barely known outside of their home country. The Witcher was eventually released in 2007 to moderate success, and put the studio on the worldwide map. But it didn't take long before things started flying apart. A planned console version ended up being cancelled after sucking up loads of cash, and at a time when CD Projekt was launching its GOG.com digital download platform, the 2008 financial crash happened and put the company in further peril. Somehow, through luck, grit and sheer determination, The Witcher 2 did get made, and eventually made its way to console in 2012. The game's success in English-speaking territories drove sales of the books, and The Witcher, a dark fantasy franchise based on Polish history and mythology, became a global phenomenon. With renewed confidence in its product, and a new generation of consoles just around the corner, the stage was set for a third game, one which would benefit from a decade of hard-earned experience and a cult following that was about to get massive. Meanwhile, Mass Effect 3, the third chapter in one of the most popular RPG series of all time, had turned people against its creators, BioWare. Incidentally, the first Witcher game ran on the Aurora engine, which was BioWare's technology, so it's all very certain.
No one cares about engines!
BioWare was at the top of the food chain when it came to role-playing video games, and they'd been there for a long time. Years ago, it seemed as though they could do no wrong. Baldur's Gate, Planescape Torment, Neverwinter Nights, Knights of the Old Republic, Jade Empire, Dragon Age Origins, all considered classics of the genre. All belted out by BioWare, the de facto CRPG studio. But with a lackluster follow-up to Dragon Age in 2011, and the complete fucking of their flagship series with a botched ending in Mass Effect 3 that sent fans of the studio mad with disappointment, the throne was vacant, and it was time for regime change. A third Dragon Age game, Inquisition, came out on the new generation of consoles, and while it did get a lot of things right, it was hardly the creative turning point that BioWare needed it to be after being under fire for so long. Many players complained about its MMO-like structure, the fact that it was padded with fetch quests and endless games of hunt the resource. One thing was clear: the BioWare of old was gone, and the Electronic Arts subsidiary that had taken its place just wasn't up to scratch. Enter The Witcher 3. CD Projekt Red's most ambitious game to date would smash all expectations for the studio in every conceivable metric. It featured a massive open world, a completely new thing for the series, which until now had been a linear, chapter-based experience. And that world was packed with stories. In a move that gave the likes of Skyrim and Fallout 3 a run for their money, those kinds of vast, open fantasy worlds being Bethesda's long-established USP, CD Projekt created a Witcher universe that felt tactile, explorable, and populated, crucially, by real people. Every quest, from the off-track side quests to the main story chapters, were handmade and featured, more often than not, winding narratives with multiple branching points. One of the most memorable and oft-discussed Witcher 3 quests is the story of the Bloody Baron, a character you will meet while working through the main story, but it's perfectly possible to move on without reaching the end of his tale. Pursue it and you'll be rewarded with one of the most heart-wrenching, one of the most harrowing ghost stories ever told by a video game. Elsewhere in the bustling medieval city of Novigrad, Geralt can get involved with a power struggle between criminal gangs, with the stakes stretching beyond the city and even to the crown itself. Choose your alliances, choose your friends, attend garden parties, solve crimes. The scope and breadth of The Witcher 3 is unparalleled, and none of it feels phoned in. None of it feels like it's been put there to inflate an hours of gameplay statistic. There are many moments in The Witcher 3 where something inconsequential to the main plot can send you on a journey of discovery. The world is full of secrets and they're all worth finding, but the main quest is every bit as good. A story of an unlikely father figure going quite literally to the ends of the earth to find a loved one. It must have taken a lot of work, but CD Projekt beat the giants at their own game. The flat quest dispenser characters of Skyrim can't hold a candle to the likes of the Bloody Baron, Triss Merigold, or even Anonymous Barmaid 15. And it's been a long time since BioWare satisfied on this level with their combat mechanics, their world building, their endings. Not only is The Witcher 3's quality unmatched, but its business model is consumer friendly to an almost piss-taking degree, and a far cry from the gouging DLC plans proposed by their rivals. CD Projekt released over a dozen free add-ons for the game, which included things like new equipment, new locations, and new quests, all things that every other studio will happily charge for. When CD Projekt did charge for additional content, it was vast and well worth the price of entry. In particular, this year's Blood and Wine expansion, which is so expansive, so detailed, so full of stuff that they could have called it The Witcher 4 and charged full price for it, except they didn't. They released it for about 15 quid a year after the main game had launched. It's a sad reflection of the industry that this is a refreshing thing to see, a company working hard to earn the trust and respect of its audience rather than charging a $5 a pop for horse blowjobs or whatever. The story of CD Projekt is the story of the modern era, the story of giants falling to make way for relatively small teams with big ideas. The story of an audience's trust being just as valuable a commodity as its cash. The industry is changing, and firms like CD Projekt are the ones shaping the future. For me, this is why The Witcher 3 Game of the Year Edition is actually the game of the generation. It's a tangible, real example of how the tectonic plates of this industry are shifting. And aside from all that, it's the biggest, best and cleverest RPG that any fucker's made since Morrowind. So play it, love it, and remember where you were when it happened, because The Witcher 3 is like the Visigoths sacking Rome. It's like the storming of the Bastille. It's like the Blair government sweeping Japan.
Shut up!